Put the bunny back in the box.
I knew you was a punk, and I was right. You been playing us all along. You a free man.
I said, put the bunny back in the box.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. Just have another one of these conversations. I thought I'd bring my good friend Tim Lim, comic book artist, onto the channel. He's also done some commercial art here back in the day. He's also, I think, you're a licensed audiologist. How many hats do you wear, Tim? Jeez.
In real life, I actually don't wear any hats. I like to have my hair exposed, but figuratively speaking, I don't know. I just kind of do a little bit of everything. But yeah, my day job is I'm an audiologist. So I got my doctorate degree back in 2011. And so, wow, this is a decade of practice this year.
And you're a husband, you're a daddy, you're a bunny daddy?
I'm a bunny daddy, not a daddy, but yeah, I have rabbits.
Absolutely. I saw one of them on Twitter that had an attitude.
Yeah, she's mad because we're moving. So I've been commuting for the last 6 years back and forth between Texas and Arkansas. And by commuting, I don't mean every day. I mean like 3 or 5 weeks here, 3 or 5 weeks there. But because my wife, she's finally done with her residency here, we're in the process of moving everything there. And so over the weekend, she took our rabbit, and the rabbit's not too happy being in the new location. She's kind of having a fit about it. So
you guys are in Texas full time?
Yeah, yeah, we were in Texas pretty much the whole time. Or at least she was. I'm here about 5 weeks.
Oh, you're back in Arkansas.
Well, right now I'm in Texas. We have one final move that we need to do on Monday, and that's the last of it. So now I'm in this barren apartment with basically nothing except a mattress, a dining table, a small couch, and my computer.
Nice. A little Chinese food on there.
A little bit of Chinese food on there. Yes, sir.
Absolutely. I've been there before. In the military, you move so often.
Yeah, so, and I told my wife, I was like, the hard part about the moving is just the sheer amount of stuff that you have. And I'm a bit of a minimalist. In my older years, I've been trying to minimize how much stuff I have. Meanwhile, I think that ever since I've known her, she's been buying stuff. And I think it taught her a lesson in terms of, hey, a lot of this stuff is yours, so you're going to have to make sure that it goes where it needs to. So hopefully in our new place, she'll not hoard and collect as much.
Absolutely. I'll be dealing with that issue here in the not too distant future. So you've had an interesting career. You know, just thinking about some of your commercial work, you started out doing T-shirts. Obviously, you're an audiologist. You're doing some T-shirt designs. You've done everything. You've done Star Wars, Marvel. You've done the gamut of all the high-profile brands that people would know.
Yeah, most of them. We were fortunate in that I worked for a company that held all the licenses, and this was back in 2012 when, we were right there at the pop culture boom. And it was still kind of rare to have companies that held on to so many licenses. I just happened to work for one that had the major ones outside of DC. DC is the only major property I haven't done any work for as far as commercial art is concerned. But they had me starting on with Transformers because I think in their fashion department, they really didn't have a lot of artists who were good at drawing robots. And that was kind of my foot in the door. So I was doing Transformer stuff, and then their Marvel license was selling very well in stores, so that was the next one. And probably within 3 weeks they just had me working on a multitude of things, so that was very exciting in terms of growing my portfolio and getting myself out there.
And you were able to kind of jumpstart your career and start, I guess you were invited to do some store exclusive variant covers. Was that the next step when you actually got into comics?
Yeah, that was years later, because what happened was, so merchandising artwork pays very well. It's very lucrative, but you don't have much notoriety. There's not, because you don't really think about who does your shirt designs when you go to a Kohl's or a Hot Topic or a Walmart. You just think it's a cool design and you just buy it. So I noticed that, especially doing like convention scenes and stuff, it was kind of a hard sell. And there's where this connection between you and I comes, Wes. Heroes and Fantasies down in San Antonio, I just happened to be friends with the store owner. And just one day he kind of asked me, he's like, well, what's your ambition in life? Because as far as this art stuff is concerned, it's cool doing T-shirts and stuff, but you have to kind of up your game. And I said, I actually would like to do comic covers. I think that would be really cool. So we had the opportunity. I went with them to San Diego Comic-Con, and I think that was 2015. Yeah. And he introduced me to some IDW editors, and I had a portfolio with me. And he said, "This is my friend Tim. We'd like to do like a store variant for whatever you got." And he had a listing of stuff that was coming out, and it was Back to the Future #1. And I said, "Yes, I definitely want to do that one. That would be a dream come true." So that was the very first cover I did. And then that kind of got the ball rolling. Most of the stuff I've done is through IDW, but I've done some other stuff too, like for Valiant, for example. That was a lot of fun. I've done some work for Dynamite. So just kind of things here and there to build up my resume and my portfolio.
So I'm glad you're putting the timestamps in here, because we're getting to a very contentious time in American history, or at least recent American history. We're coming up on an election, and everything starts to polarize. And all of a sudden, the industry, not just the comic industry, just entertainment, and it feels like everything has changed, right? People are losing friends on Facebook. Oh, you said this. We're no longer family, kind of stuff. I remember, I've talked to comic book colorist Brett Smith on the channel, and he starts noticing that all of a sudden, him listening to Rush Limbaugh is offensive. Whereas in the past, people knew that he was conservative, knew what he thought, but they could still have a beer together and still work. All of a sudden, things are starting to change at this time, Tim, as you're starting to break into comic books. And recently I did a video on the repercussions of Nick Spencer kind of breaking away from the hive, right? He kind of doing his own thing, going to Substack, which we're seeing a lot of people do, and they're all kind of being vilified because of that, because they're kind of going out on their own and breaking away from the established norm within comic books. What happens when you're Tim Lim and you never plugged into the hive? Like, are you outed immediately? Are they nicer to you because maybe from the beginning they knew you weren't one of them?
Well, I noticed something, and this is something that I think we've talked about on this channel before. When I was working in merchandising and I was going through different conventions and stuff, one thing that we never did between like my wife and Mark and me, and at the time my agent was actually traveling with them, we noticed that we never made friends. And one of the reasons why is there's so many cultural differences, and it's not just geographical. It's, I think, in the industry itself. I have talked ad nauseum about how I don't think it's a left and right issue as far as comics is concerned. I do think it's a question of basically the outside world versus comics culture versus, let's say, the culture of mangaka in Japan is very different. So one of the reasons why it was kind of easy for us to work on political parodies is we weren't really scared of quote unquote being canceled, because like when we're outsiders, we've always been outsiders, and we're just going to kind of do what we do. And we're not really scared about what you have to say about it.
And you weren't willing to go to BarCon and buy some editor's drinks, so maybe you could do a variant cover here and there.
Yeah, exactly. So we never encountered that situation. And the way that we saw it was, well, the people who, in the years that we were doing merchandising, we couldn't think of a single person who we just thought, well, if this person doesn't like me before, they're really not going to like me now. I mean, that's just the mentality. And so we just thought, what's there to lose? Like when we did our books and people would say, oh, I lost all respect for you. And I was like, I didn't think you had respect for me to begin with, because we weren't really friends. So it didn't really matter. But it gave us kind of this outside perspective. I mean, for example, over the weekend, we went to Bell County Comic-Con, and there's this kind of debate amongst a lot of independent creators where it's like, hey, do I just stay on YouTube and social media, or should I do conventions? And my answer has always been, you should do what you can to get your product out there. And I like conventions. Mark and I love conventions.
However you can interact with your audience and potential customers best. Absolutely.
It's not just that, but it's also the perspective. You might be a big fish on social media and on the internet, but when you're at a convention and there's people who are local and they just want to have a good time, they don't know who you are. And so you find out, can you sell a book just based on its premise alone? Can you actually talk to a flesh and blood human being one-to-one, face-to-face, and sell them on your property, devoid of any recognition of if you're like an internet superstar or whatever? And that makes you, I think, a better marketer. That gives you that perspective to be able to kind of talk like a common man. And so you're able to do that. And the crew that we were with, they all did a fantastic job. a lot of them have never done a show before, much less in the United States, and they just killed it because they had so much confidence in their work that they were able to sell. So I don't know. It's kind of like water off a duck's back as far as Mark and I have been concerned. I mean, have there been times where we're scared of like losing our job? Maybe scared of a crazy person calling into work and complaining. But we come from a pretty, where we are geographically is such that I think the legal hassle of trying to like fire someone based on dubious political ground is very, very unlikely. So we've been very fortunate in that regard.
It's crazy. Obviously, I've known you guys, both Mark and you, and obviously Doug's part of the crew and Aaron Sparrow. I've known you guys for a little while, had you on the channel here. We're friends on social media. I see your posts. For the most part, do I know that Tim Lim is a conservative by his Twitter feed? Absolutely. But you're not really antagonistic about it. You might like a tweet here and there, but for the most part, you kind of keep it to comics. And if you have a little political commentary, you're not being provocative all that much. And Mark is certainly provocative, but it's normally about like 80s horror movies and stuff like that.
Yeah, or
it's
retweets
not really the
and
politics
stuff.
where he gets, I wouldn't say out of line, but he gets a little animated with some of his comments.
Yeah, and especially me. I mean, now that everything is over, it's like, well, it's kind of time to move on and fight the battles you can fight and enjoy the things that you can take joy out of that don't have anything to do with politics. So, I mean, maybe in the past I was maybe a little bit more spicy, but especially after entering the arena of putting books out, it's like you got to tamper down some of that stuff so that people can at least get to know you based on the work that you put out, not necessarily like your hot takes as far as politics are concerned. I like freedom of speech, and that's why for Mark, for example, he asked me, he said, hey, I've worked for people in the past who want to edit me or censor me. Like, as friends, is that something that you want to do? And I said, no, I'm not going to ever censor you, but I'm just going to warn you. I just don't want you to come running to me when someone is like, hey, I'm going to refund your book because I don't like what you said on Twitter. I feel like you're a grown enough man to know that you're responsible of what you put out there and you're responsible of the ramifications of that. And I'm aware of that. Like, I know that the price of that freedom of speech is that if it impacts me, where it's hurting our sales, me included, I'm like, well, it's because I didn't police Mark. But then again, I'm willing to take it because I believe that everyone should be able to kind of speak their mind and learn from it. It's kind of a trial and error type thing.
But it's kind of crazy. You guys aren't the spiciest political commentators as far as comic book writers on the left or right. I will put that out there. You put the, what is it? Thump, the first 100 days, right?
Yeah.
And you got, it's a parody book about Trump as a rabbit in his first 100 days in office. And all of a sudden you get branded like with all these names. Like, there's an article out there calling you a white supremacist.
Yeah, it's good times. And I think the good thing is that most of the people who know us, they're very rational people, and we don't have to really have these conversations. But it's like, there's that thing called the moving goalpost fallacy, where it's like you're caught. And so what you do is you move the standard because it's the only way you can justify what it is that you believe in. And so I just remember I used to play these gotcha games where people would say, oh, you're a white supremacist. And I'm like, do I look like a white supremacist? Because I'm Asian. And lo and behold, like recently, there have been several articles where it's like, oh, but whatever's happening is actually the result of white supremacy, regardless of the race that's being that is perpetrating it.
I've noticed that Asians are the new white people.
And Asians are the new white people. I think it's 2 counties in the United States where Asians and whites are actually grouped together. And that's not by accident. That's because it's like, well, the goalpost has to move because you have these Asian people and some of them are conservative, and we just have to make sure that they're pigeonholed.
We're going to demonize them. We can put them up with this other group that's already okay to demonize, and then we got a little covered.
Right, exactly. And I see some comics creators who agree wholeheartedly with that. And you get to see kind of how easily people are swayed. They basically will glom onto the most ridiculous notion just to justify their own beliefs. And I don't know, that stuff makes me sad. I mean, they always say that right now we're going through a thing called the Great Divorce, which is just based on the political lines and the geographical lines, people are, quote unquote, choosing sides. For example, if you don't like the politics in New York, you move to Texas or you move to Florida. And this is this idea that maybe over time, we are just going to end up having like just pure red states, pure blue states, and everyone just kind of knows this is where you are, because we can't get along. And a lot of it is based off, in my opinion, very kind of ridiculous ideas, things that were not even political concepts 5 years ago, but now they're hot button issues. And I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. As an Asian growing up in the South, I don't know, I can count on like 2 fingers how many times I've encountered quote unquote real racists. And we grew up with just a multitude of people in our environment. And that was, I thought we got over this stuff years ago, back in the 80s, and now we're resurrecting it as if it's something that had never been defeated. So it's a strange political landscape, both outside in the real world and inside the world of comics. But I think as far as what I have control over, we definitely have control over who we associate with in the comics culture. And for the most part, we're divorced from the quote unquote mainstream professionals, or even former ones. We just don't talk to them because I think that their culture has really contributed to a lot of the downfall of modern comics.
It's really insular. They like to brag about how they're self-policing until something comes out and everybody knew that this guy was doing it the whole time. Well, you let it go on for 10 years. It was a good thing you're so insular. I call it more on the lines of incestuous when I kind of describe the culture of the comic book industry. It's just weird how people have been so emboldened to just say words about people that they don't know and make these allegations.
Yeah, and most of it.
I live in the Philippines. You know this. The
Yeah.
viewers know this. I've had multiple people tell me I'm xenophobic.
Yeah, and you're basically, I mean, you have a Filipino wife, and you live in a quote unquote, you live in a quote unquote Asian diverse environment. If we're just using that,
it's not
word.
diverse. You know how diverse this is compared to the United States.
Well, you know what I mean, quote unquote.
No, I get what
diverse.
you're saying, but I'm an actual minority. I'm just, maybe 1% of us here are white. Everyone else is Filipino.
Yeah.
You go to the U.S. and it's truly a melting pot. I don't think people realize that, especially that live in the U.S. Once you go to other countries, even in Europe, the diversity isn't nearly doesn't surround you quite like it does in the U.S.
It's the most puzzling thing. I mean, again, these are just semantic arguments. They boil down to the objective nature of what a definition is. The definition of diverse, I mean, a buffet is diverse because it's vegetables, fruit, meat, fish, seafood, ice cream, you name it. But when you have like basically a homogenous grouping, that's not diverse. I mean, everyone kind of looks the same. And you would think that this would be a very basic argument, but then I see it all the time. I remember, for example, when Black Panther came out, there were so many articles that said, oh, we have a diverse cast. I was like, I don't think you guys really know what that word means, because not really. You have like a fairly homogenous cast just on the outset alone, just looking at things from a physical aspect. But I don't know. You mean diverse in terms of talent, or do you mean diverse just in the case of skin color? Because if it's the latter, you're definitely not diverse. And like what you were saying in the Philippines, you're the minority, because you look around and it's either the native Filipinos or it's Filipino Chinese that happen to be there. And sometimes you can't even tell the difference. And that's just me speaking as a person of both blood, Filipino and Chinese. I get to say that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of older white gentlemen in my town. They look like they're about 30 years older than me. My wife's like, "You want to go talk to that guy?" No, not really. He's old enough to be my grandpa. Like, get out of here. There's nobody my age. I talked to my buddy that's Filipino. He's in the fire department. I got another buddy that's got a construction company and everything. That's who I consort with, on my day-to-day life. And obviously when I come here on YouTube, I talk to people that like comic books. There are no comic shops here, Tim. I'm kind of constrained on who I can talk about my hobbies with.
Yeah, I think you literally have to fly in comics from the nearest shop on the nearest island. Most people,
Manila, it's the only city that has this comic shop, and I think they have 8 of them.
Yeah, most people don't realize that Philippines is a cluster of islands, multiple ones. So just because it's a country, and just because we think we're so accustomed to having the necessities and the shops that most major cities now have, that convenience has not extended to a lot of other countries, especially a country like the Philippines where you have so many islands in its group.
Closest movie theater is 4.5 hours, and it burned down.
Oh my gosh, I'm so
They're
sorry.
supposed to be building a theater here. Now they had to rebuild that mall.
But on the other hand, you're surrounded by good people. I mean, Filipinos they're great people. They're awesome. As a culture, they're so happy all the time.
Yeah, really love the culture here, and there's the family dynamics. You can't beat it.
No, and they're very, how do I put it? I don't want to say blunt. There's not really any political correctness. They call the spade the spade.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Whenever I talk to my wife about like current politics in America, she's just like, my goodness.
Yeah, shakes her head like, what the heck?
That's dumb. But I don't know. It's just a weird place that we've gotten where, like you said, the great divide, the great divorce, whatever you want to call it, that's going on. And I don't know. It's weird, the way people are treated. And I think probably at this point, you're probably happy that you didn't go dive all in and try and be a part of the comic industry. It's probably better to be an outsider.
Yeah, and the good thing is that I never really wanted to. So the whole comics thing, I mean, honestly, that was the last thing I wanted to do. The most I ever wanted to do was covers. And basically, I just got bitten by the bug whenever we did our first thing. I was like, oh, I didn't know I had it in me to do sequential work. This is kind of fun. And you saw where that took me, because now I just don't stop. I just draw all the time, and it's almost entirely sequential work. But yeah, looking back, I am glad that I was never really part of that crowd. And again, you can look at comics, and that's like a microcosm of like art culture in general. It's just a field I've never been interested in. So when Mark and I think of art and just storytelling and stuff, we look at Disney's old model, like the 9 Old Men. These are like white, blue collared individuals. They married the ink and paint girls. They clocked in at 9, they clocked out at 5, and they went home to the white picket fence. So they lived kind of this Americana lifestyle. And then at some point, I mean, I'm not an art historian, so I can't really speak with authority on it. But let's just say around like kind of this, there just became at some point a culture around art and the arts. And if you were an artist, here are the things that you have to do. You have to basically be a bohemian. You have to smoke cigarettes and be poor and wear berets and dress weird and talk weird. And I can't help but think that some of that kind of worked its way into comics as a culture, because, like I said, I've always felt like an outsider. I never bought into this idea of, oh, if you're an artiste, these are the things that you have to do. This is how you have to vote. This is how you have to act. This is who you can be friends with. This is who you can't be friends with. I'm just like, buddy, I get paid to draw what people want me to draw. There's no cultural component to it. I treat it as a mechanical, almost like mechanical labor. So yeah, in hindsight, I'm very happy that that was not something that was even remotely a temptation for us.
Well, obviously you've seen things happen to other people that were, kind of connected in the industry. We saw what happened to Brett Smith, Chuck Dixon, and some of the other conservative leaning creators essentially have been kicked out of the industry. Like, how important is it, for you to have like a group that you can depend on? Obviously, you and Mark work together, but we're friends with Doug, and you've also got Aaron Sparrow's kind of a friend of ours. You got other friends in the industry that you work with. How important is it to have like that support group where you can bounce stuff off of people? Because I know from my seat, it kind of sucks being isolated, because I'm in the Philippines. It gets very frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, it's important in the sense that we're in a river and it's flowing, and when you have an obstacle in your way, you have to work your way around it. And one thing that we try to do is just never play the victim. I mean, there's sometimes where it's kind of fun to kind of have a witty retort to someone, but to just kind of sell yourself as being perpetually like, I was blacklisted, like donate money to me because we have to fight the war and everything like that. I mean, to some extent, I think that a lot of that's egregious, and I disagree with it. But you can only do that for so long before it's like, are you just trying to play the victim, or are you actively going to try and do something about it? Especially people who are like comics professionals. I mean, they all know each other. You have a sort of network of people who are maybe either like-minded or very sympathetic to what it is that is happening. And those are the people where you should try and stick together as much as possible. over the last 4 years, I mean, that's kind of what me, Doug Ernst, is what we've done. We just found people who I feel share our same values, our same outlook in life, and being able to get together and share that without any fear of repercussion is good. And it shows that there's nothing stopping you. The only limitation you have to any success, that's between you and your readership. That's really all that boils down to. So I do think that that's important. And especially if you're like in the industry, it is hard to find people who are of like mind, but I mean, they're out there and you find out pretty quickly. Like, it's not one of those things that's like so deeply hidden that you're just never going to find out. You just do a little bit of poking and prodding, and it's actually fairly easy to find out.
And there's a lot of people that are in the industry that might be more conservative leaning that I've found.
Yeah,
they can't tell anybody.
Yeah, they're either conservative leaning or they just don't tell anyone. And even by not telling anyone, that already sends a message of, hey, I'm amicable to everyone. I really don't care what your politics are. I just try to get along. And that's good too. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that at all. In fact, it's preferable. I think that's how we used to be in terms of how we interacted with each other. I don't ask people what their politics are. I really don't care. I've had several dinners and lunches and convention meetings with people who I know did not agree with me politically, and I did not agree with them. But I'd never bring that up as a question. That's never a litmus test for my friendship. It's just based on, can we have a conversation as just normal Joes talking, eating together, having conversation, things of that nature, without you saying that I'm something I'm not. And that's really what that boils down to. But I think that in a lot of the professional circles, I mean, that level of decorum is only extended to people who are of like mind, and that's disturbing no matter who you are and no matter what field you're in. Yeah,
and it seems to get worse and worse by the day. It's crazy, the animosity that's out there. I'm sure you've been reading comic books your entire life, correct?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, you and Mark both, and Doug's been reading since he was a young man. When you see all the things happening within the industry, it's almost like DC and Marvel have a mandate from on high to go out there and provoke and see what they can do to their readers to make them leave. It's the most insane thing that I've ever seen in my life. I will never understand what's happening right now.
And I think a lot of it is bolstered by a too big to fail mentality, which has been the downfall of several companies in the past, not necessarily comics related, where the idea is, well, we have to push this agenda. Well, we're losing money. It doesn't matter because we're getting bankrolled from above. Well, eventually the wages have to be collected, and you end up paying a price for it. So I don't think that, and maybe I'm too optimistic or Pollyanna-ish, but eventually you're going to have these diminishing returns to the point where it just crashes, whatever it is that you're trying to subvert. People are not going to read what you have to offer. They'll just leave and they'll go to manga. I mean, heck, I pretty much have made that switch completely. I mean, I can only think of so many titles I read right now. Everything I read is manga. And I've had this talk on our channel and other channels like Tyler Carpenter's channel, Draw and Talk, where we're looking at the difference between manga and Western comics. And I've always said, hey, part of this is a learning process. You should always be learning. It's all business. You should try and get ideas from other people. There's been a lot of pushback to that, where it's like, no, we don't have to learn from manga. Manga's the enemy. It's like manga is outselling you by a factor of like 10 to 1. So why is it so bad to just look at what they're doing? In fact, I'm willing to stake that what they're doing is what we used to do, and we just stopped doing it for one reason or the other. So in other words, if you just get rid of the word manga and just say like those people over there, they're essentially learning from
Japanese
us.
comics.
Yeah, they're learning from us in terms of the things that we used to do, applying it to their own storytelling, and that's why they're widely successful. For example, like when I pick up a manga nowadays, I don't really screen it for any like political content or anything like that, because I just assume it's not going to have a lot of the stuff in it. Yeah, like I don't have to worry about a character who I like. I don't have to worry about them becoming. You don't
have to worry if the writers got you blocked,
or changing or changing sexual orientation or race at the drop of a hat just because it fits their their mood at that time of day. I mean, that's just stuff you don't have to worry about. These people are going to try and sell you on a very cohesive, organic story from beginning to end. And that's just something that's refreshing, because this is something that we used to do, but we don't do anymore, at least as far as like the mainstream is concerned.
You know what's crazy about the mainstream? Obviously, you've seen Substack, right?
Yeah.
We've got Jonathan Hickman, James Tynan, Nick Spencer, Scott Snyder. Who else? I think Chip Zdarsky was announced within the last 24 hours. There's some really big names. And for the most part, those people, those creators, and the ones I just named, for the most part, not all of them, but they are like-minded of what is being implemented into the big two and what's being put out to drive a narrative or push an agenda, right? They're amicable to that. But even they see that there might not be a future in it and they have to go somewhere else. I think that's one of the things that's being missed about all of this is these people, these creators, and a lot of them were big name creators and have sway and pull and could have policed themselves, because comic books, we're a small community, we police ourselves, could have had a strong voice and said, listen, this is not going to work out well. We need to course correct. But they let things go down so far that now even they're realizing it's a good thing that I can get my own parachute, in abandoned ship here. And maybe get a soft landing via these grants that are coming out from Substack.
Right.
You could definitely debate whether or not they had a part to have, if they had a part in all this.
Yeah, and I think that to their credit, though, working for the companies, there are like non-disclosure agreements. There's this idea of don't talk bad about your employer. So how much of it is muzzled on their part, I'm sure plays a role into that. But I think that that's the writing on the wall in case people haven't seen it. You have these big name creators who are basically going independent. And I think a lot of that too has to do with, I think it's a talk that you had recently with someone. It's this idea of, are they putting out the best content they can, or are they holding on to their best content because the pay and the prestige is not good enough to warrant giving their best ideas to corporations when they can just take it and use it on their own? Now, the people that you listed, they tend to be pretty highly regarded as far as what they're putting out. So I'm not saying that they're part of that or that's part of their overall plan or their scheme, but there are people who are thinking about that. And what does it say about the industry where it's like, well, these people are not going to give their best because the pay does not justify giving away their best ideas to like a corporate IP when they can go completely independent. My mentality is when you're working for an employer, you just give it your all, no matter who you're working for. But, we've seen historically that as far as like comics are concerned, there's always those fights that happen regarding who owns what, royalty, credit, that type of thing. So a lot of this is not very surprising. We'll see how Substack goes for these writers. At this point, any innovation in industry is a welcome one, regardless of what you might think about it, whether it succeeds or fails. You got to do something if you're going to want to try and reclaim or at least rejuvenate the American comics industry.
You can only steer the Titanic into the iceberg for so long.
Yeah.
Where you have to, you're like, okay, enough of this. We gotta try something else.
Yeah, you might be steering
to end in disaster.
Yeah, you might be steering the Titanic away from the iceberg into shark-infested waters, but at least you're steering it away from a sure disaster.
Absolutely, you never know on these things, and it's been a big deal. It's been a big buzz. And are you shocked to see everyone saying, "Oh, that's a bigoted platform. It's all alt-right and hate mongers. How could you sign up for that?"
No, I haven't been seeing any of that. I think as I mentioned before we started streaming, I'm getting caught up. I've been so busy over the convention that I'm actually having to rewatch some of these YouTube videos that I missed out on. So I completely missed the Substack thing by a whole day. So if they're saying that, I definitely haven't heard about it.
Yes, they are. They're doing the narrative that Substack is this evil platform that allows hate and everything to go on it, and thus anybody that would go over there is like endorsing hate.
The only thing I can say is a lot of the chatter online does not translate into the real world, and a lot of it is just paper tigers. So they seem to be having a lot of influence, but especially if you just listen to Twitter, how many of these people are bots? How many of these are repeat accounts? How many of these are socks? For any company where they're under the peer pressure to kind of quit, my advice is just no. I mean, not unless they're showing up at your door screaming bloody murder because they want to kill you. Don't apologize to a mob, especially if you feel like you have nothing to apologize for. Guilt is very strong. It's an Alinskyite tactic, and it's just something that you have to ignore. Never apologize for anything that you don't have contrition for.
Absolutely. So speaking of bots, I did a video. I'm sure you saw this. I think you're a Tim Drake fan. Tim Drake was confirmed bisexual this week. I made a video about it. And I've got all these people, all of a sudden, they've never been in any of my videos before. They've never commented before. I'm certain most of them aren't comic book readers, and they're like, oh, this, it's a sexual awakening and all this stuff. And I was trying to explain to them. I was like, this is a comic book YouTube channel. This is not a sexual awakening YouTube channel. My criticism is about the execution of how this went. It makes no sense. It came out overnight, and they just want to sit there and argue with it. And you're right. There's a lot of them that are bots.
Yeah. And it makes sense because they come out of the woodwork. And if you look just from a statistical perspective, you have people with alternative lifestyles. But if you just look at the United States alone, the most liberal estimate has it where they're like less than 2% of the population. So you can extrapolate that and apply it to basically anything that you want. And you just ask yourself, it's like, what are the odds that all these people here, let's say you have 80 comments and there's like 20 of them that are kind of vicious and calling you names and stuff. It's like, well, is this really indicative or reflective of the population as a whole? Is it just reflective of the kind of outlier of comic readers? Like, what is going on here? And when you start looking at it in that way, it's like, yeah, I think most of these people are fake. It's one person, or it's just a series of bots that are just programmed.
They're not comic readers. If they're real people, there's a group, and they're saying, okay, you need to go here and comment on this video, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not grassroots. Let's put it that way. It's not organic. How's that?
Yeah. And I was looking at whatchamacallit, I was looking at a lot of comments online too, not for your video per se, but just reaction in general. And I mean, you just start seeing the repetition. It's like the same things over and over again. It's pretty much just copy paste. It's always like, oh, I'm finally glad that I'm represented here. I was like, you've been represented like almost abundantly to the point where it's not even statistically that likely, the level of representation as far as that's concerned in comics. Like I don't even know what to make of it. Me personally, I've never cared. I know that you and I both share like a mutual love of G.I. Joe, and Snake Eyes, he's obviously everyone's favorite. He's my favorite. I did not care that it was a white guy under the mask. That had nothing to do with it. And whenever I see them doing something like, hey, we're going to get an Asian guy to play him, I'm like, you do know I'm fairly intelligent, that I know when I'm being pandered to, and I don't appreciate it. I know.
My point was, they can put an Asian actor in there. He's never going to take his mask off anyway.
Exactly. That's another thing too. It's like, sure, have an Asian guy under there. Just don't take his mask off, because that's the character. Then
they remove his mask, and you're like, okay, now you've broken everything.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, you see these people and it's like, oh my gosh, finally I'm represented. I just thought, there has never been a time in my life, especially growing up, where it's like, my gosh, I really want an Asian
If nobody watched Korean and Japanese cinema, it's better than American. It's all Asian casts.
Yeah. That never happened with me. I honestly didn't care. I was like, all right, so you got Batman, he's a white guy, who cares? You got Blade, he's a black guy, who cares?
An Asian action movie, there are entire cinemas. There's entire industries made for that.
That's just part of that weird cultural programming that I think is eerie, because I was like, no one I knew growing up cared. Like, if you were fat, you're not
nobody would go to Japan and say, listen, there's not enough white representation in your action movies.
Yeah.
It's balderdash that guy who grabbed the tank, whatever. It's all Asian actors. It's an Asian country. What do you want?
I think left-handed people should combine their forces and create a lobby and say, there's not enough left-handed action stars in Hollywood. Yeah. We need left-handed representation. It's like, no, at some point, people were indoctrinated into thinking like, I cannot enjoy something unless I'm represented. And it goes farther than that, because it's not just, I want someone who looks like me or is part of my identity group. It's, we have to transform someone else into that. Rather than creating your own intellectual property, creating your own character, they have to take something pre-existing
In comic books, there are so many characters across the diversity sphere. There's literally a character that hasn't been used in 5 years, represents every single group. They're just waiting to be used for some TLC.
Yeah, and not just that, but let's say the argument is, well, that character sucks, like no one likes them. Well, you're looking at a multi-billion-dollar set of companies where they have access to all the top writing talent out there. Why not just take a character that sucks and make him good? When I was working in merchandising, so here's a funny story. When I was working in merchandising, we didn't do much for Guardians of the Galaxy because it was a relatively unknown property. Unless you just were really big into reading comics, you really didn't know much about them. My wife and I go to see Guardians of the Galaxy on opening day, and we left the theater, and I was like, I think we made a big mistake because we had no merchandise ready. And sure enough, like even my boss called, he was like, have you seen Guardians yet? And I was like, I just got out. He was like, I want as many designs as possible by Monday. Like
Baby Groot.
Yeah,
first.
like everything. Baby Groot, Drax, Rocket Raccoon. I want it all. And I told my wife, I said, this is a game changer because now it's told Marvel that you can take an unknown property, and if you give it tender love and care, you can overnight create a cultural awareness that did not exist before. So I don't like the excuse of, oh, well, there is this character and it represents me. It's Left-Handed Man, but Left-Handed Man sucks. It's like, well, don't blame the character, blame the company because they have access to it and they can bolster that character up. I don't like this idea of, well, we have to swap the race or gender or whatever identity of this other character that's more popular. It's like, now you're just being jealous and greedy because you want the notoriety, the attention, and the fame, but you don't want to work for it. You just want to do a bait and switch. And I think it's the laziest form of creative.
New Mutants was DOA.
Right.
So they put Rob Liefeld on that series, and he rejuvenated it and revitalized the entire New Mutants concept. You know, obviously that goes into kind of was it X Factor, I believe, is what spun out of that one.
Yeah. So it can be done, right? Like it's been tested time and time again that you can take these properties, and if you give it the right people on board, and then you have some where it's like they do that, but then they're almost like ashamed of it, where they want to promote it. It's kind of like when Robert Venditti was on Hawkman. I mean, like review after review was saying, wow, this is one of the best books that's out there right now, if not the best take on the character. But they just didn't do anything to promote it. And it's like, I don't know what to tell you at that point. Like you guys are the mega corporation. I'm sure marketing is not a hard thing for you guys to do, but it's like they didn't even try.
Well, he wasn't destroying the character. That's the weirdest thing I don't get about all this stuff, Tim. How many characters do you think they can destroy in the cinema and in comic books before they realize that you have to stay true to these characters? And if you want that moment, you actually have to earn it. You have to build up and work towards it. And then when you execute it, people are happy. When you just do it for the sake of doing it and pandering, everyone knows you didn't earn it, and you're just doing it for virtue signal points.
Yeah, and it's also this idea of we tend to be attracted to the thing that we do the most. So I think people who are perpetually aggrieved, people who are just they have a chip on their shoulder, they're mad all the time, they're always looking for a fight, they want to have a spat with someone, they're just miserable. They seem to wallow in those types of characters. Like they like the deconstruction because it's like, well, maybe subconsciously they think I'm a broken person and this person is as broken as I am. Whereas me personally, I avoid all that stuff. I mean, like nowadays I read a lot of slice of life, a lot of humor, a little bit of romance.
Tom King is killing me, man. It's awful.
Yeah. And I'm attracted to that because I'm like, at the end of a hard day, when I sit down with my entertainment, I want to feel good. I don't want to put something down and feel bad. I want something that is emotionally cathartic because it's inspiring, it's uplifting. And I think that a lot of these people, again, part of this culture is the brokenness is it's repeating itself in our entertainment. And rather than people trying to find a better way, they want to wallow in it because it's easier to destroy something than build something up. And it's easier to see yourself reflected in a mirror of yourself than to see heroism represented in something that is not you. And I think that was something, again, in the 80s, like no one cared about race back then. I mean, like, honestly, we had gone to the point where in a way, we got over it. It was just a non-issue. You just didn't really have to think about it. I mean, one of my favorite cartoons growing up was like Cops, and not the live action one. I'm talking about the animated one. And the main guy, Bulletproof, he was like a black Clark Kent. I didn't care he was black. You look at Blade, you know, you don't care either. G.I. Joe, Roadblock. In my mind, I was like, these are just cool people. I don't have to see myself in them. What I see in them are the ideals that make a character or a hero stand out and live in your head. It's as if they're real people and you can like them, you can interact with them. I'm sure you
remember the commercials. I want to be like Mike.
I want to be like Mike. Yeah.
Of the world. Everybody want to be like Michael Jordan.
Exactly. And you
had
Michael Jordan.
Human beings shouldn't be able to do.
Right. You had Michael Jordan on one side. You had Larry Bird on the other. I just remember as a kid growing up, no one cared. They were both cool. Everyone liked them. But again, I do blame a lot of our education system. I do blame some pop culture.
Well, you got a master's degree. You got a doctorate. How did you make it out?
I don't know. Honestly, I just put into work. I mean, I went through academia at a time where you disagreed with people. That was okay. I mean, that is the nature of an academic setting. In fact, that's one reason why tenure exists. Tenure exists so that you can say some pretty ridiculous stuff and not get in trouble with it, because it's the idea that the university setting was supposed to be a marketplace of ideas. Fortunately, when I was in my 20s, people didn't really care too much about politics. Like, there wasn't such a divide. You just understood that you had like kind of liberals, conservatives, libertarians in between. You had some outliers, people who just didn't care. And that was fine. And that was kind of the environment that I grew up in, or at least the one that I was in for quite a while as I was getting my degree. The whole political aspect of it. I mean, I remember, like, if you were on the left, I didn't call you a commie. If I was on the right, you didn't call me like the N-word. So that's just how we all got along. I just know that things are very different now.
Yes, they are. That'd be a whole nother discussion. Just getting into everything wrong with academia. My goodness. The tenure has definitely been used for different reasons now. Right.
And who gets tenure tends to be a little bit one-sided, and that's an understatement. It's you have to toe a line, and that's the freedom of speech that is heralded. Unfortunately, the entire point of tenure was the idea that you would be protected to kind of say what you mean, say what you think, back it up in kind of a court of your peers, and be judged accordingly. But that's changed. It couldn't
pressure you into towing the party line. You presented your research unbiased.
No, and tenure now is basically, it's the gate for the ivory tower, is essentially what it is. And when you're in the ivory tower, you're part of that club.
Yeah. It's crazy, Tim. So I guess we should end this talking about comic books. It is a comic book YouTube channel. We hit the gamut of things here today. I know this past weekend we did have Bell County Comic Con. You were there. Mark was there. Was it Doug Ernst, Aaron Sparrow? A lot of friends of the channel were there, having a good time. Aaron could not stop talking about how great it was. What was Bell County? Were you anxious to get back to the convention scene?
Oh, yeah. Mark and I do anywhere between 10 and 13 conventions a year, as opposed to last year, obviously, because a lot of things shut down. So I know that the showrunner, I mean, he was eager to get it back rolling. I know that he was devastated last year when they had to cancel everything. He did not want to do that, but it made no sense. I mean, even with the protocols in place, it was like, well, it's like 25% capacity. It's like, well, we can't generate enough ticket sales to offset the cost that you accrue from getting a bunch of guests in, having to worry about the volunteers, things of that nature. So this was the thing that was like pretty much a whole year in the making. But the thing that we didn't know if we were going to pull off or not was, who are we going to get? Like, who are the creators? And I was talking to Doug Ernst about this, reflecting back on it. If you had told me 4 years ago that we would find a group of like-minded individuals we're just dudes, we all get along, we don't have any egos between us, and we put out good quality books. I mean, we made it happen. I know a lot of people talk about it where it's like, we're going to get together, we're going to combine. And it's like, here we are. We're guys who don't even do this as a full-time job. And we did it. We did it.
Every one of you, it's a side hustle.
It's all a side hustle for us. And we did it. So there was nothing stopping us. And I think someone even commented on the video that Doug did. They were like, this like renewed spark that I have in me for independent comics, because it shows that you can do it. And it's like, yeah, Doug, you know, he was a journalist for the Washington Times. I'm an audiologist. Alejandro, he's like a deep sea diver. And Mark, he works at the university. And yet we made it happen. We were able to pool our resources together, and we did this. I mean, like, honestly, I was over the moon. Common America was the flagship character of the convention. It's the third largest.
Special cups. My goodness.
We had special cups. We sold out of every single one of them. It was crazy. All the badge artwork was iconic comics.
I miss a great food stand with a freaking pun in the name. Come on.
Yeah.
Get out of that here.
Yeah. So we had a good time. Everyone had a blast. We got in Aaron Sparrow at the last minute, so I'm really happy that he was able to come, and he enjoyed himself immensely. We actually had to go into an emergency print mode because he sold out of pretty much everything on the first day. So I called our printer and I said, hey, we need 230 prints done overnight, and we need to pick him up in the morning. And they did it. And at the end of that Sunday, he only had like a quarter of that stuff left to take home.
He was unprepared. He was not expecting to be one of the guests there, so he didn't really show up with a lot of stuff. And it sounds like you guys moved heaven and earth to get him enough product so people could go in there and get his autograph and stuff. But I could tell you this: I was talking to him after he got the news. We were recording our final video before he went there. He was giddy like a schoolgirl. He was very excited to get to Bell County.
Yeah, and he got to hang out with us too. So we were all friends, but this is the first time that we got together as a group, met each other, sat down, broke bread with each other, and hang out. It was a great time. Everyone loved it. We sold a ton of books. I mean, like, the last 3 days I've been playing touch and go with the convention owner. I've been seeing the pallets of books moving back and forth from the convention center to storage. And I mean, we were throwing away boxes of empty boxes because all the books were sold out, and everyone hustled, and we did good. And again, we did it with no room
for Old West, though, right?
Yeah, I stole all your cast from you. I'm sorry, even your contributors. But at the end of the day, I mean, like, we kind of looked at each other and we're like, we did it without any professionals helping us. And you have a lot of professionals.
I hate it when you guys say this. You're all professionals. People spend real hard-earned money that they go in to their work every single day. They grind their butts off, and they decide to take a portion of that work and send it to you guys because they want your work back. You guys are professionals.
Well, what I mean is
side hustle. I got you.
Yeah. Whenever I talk about professionals, I mean vocationally something you do full time. And so outside of our group, you have like Aaron Sparrow. He does that. Obviously, that's it. That's what he does, the bread and butter. So we do have a few outliers that we're friends with.
Aaron Sparrow trades in action figures. That's his full-time job.
I know. I hear it's 5 figures a week.
5 figures a week.
Yeah, he does pretty well for himself. So no, overall, it was fun. We did it. We liked the feedback that we got. People said, you know, you've shown a better way of doing it. You've shown that you can do it with a network of basically good guys who are able to put things out in time without relying on drama to do it.
Is Iconic growing? Or are you guys happy with the stable you have?
Oh no, we're growing. This is just the beginning. Yeah, we've had several team meetings over the last 3 days after the convention talking about our plans. I think there's gonna be a few surprises coming up here in September. And if we can pull it off, I think there's gonna be like a major surprise that people are gonna have in the early spring of next year. But we don't put all of our eggs in one basket. We're always looking and experimenting and trying new things. So I'm really excited to see how the next year plays out.
All right. So when can people expect the next crowdfunding campaign for one of your projects?
So
in the next 60 days, 90 days?
Yeah, so right now we're in fulfillment for Black Ops X Common America. The books are arriving tomorrow here in Texas, so I actually have to help them unload the pallets for that. Iconic Comics is actually on a 10-day hiatus. They have some other things going on. So if people go to iconiccomics.com, you'll actually see the warning up there saying that if you pre-order, you have to wait a couple days, 10 days, for them to get back into it. The day that we start fulfillment on this, we're going to start the campaign on Indiegogo for the same book, Black Ops X Common America. We're going to run that for 2 weeks. And then after that, if I'm timing everything well, we should have Common America 4 closing out the year sometime in mid-September. And that will be it for this year. And we launch Common America 5 in spring of next year.
So if people want to give one of these wonderful Mark Pellegrini, Tim Lim comic books as a Christmas gift, you either need to support the September campaign, or you're going to have to go to iconic.com and get you an order from there.
Yeah, exactly. And we're going to try and do the Christmas delivery. Right now I have everything planned so that the fulfillment for the fourth book should take place the week before Thanksgiving. Generally speaking, they do a good job in doing fulfillment in under a week, which means that all the parcels should be out by early December. And that would be great because hopefully we can guarantee a Christmas fulfillment.
All right, man. So when am I going to show up in another one of these comic books? I know I was in one volume already, and I feel like my character didn't have the arc that they probably should have.
Yeah, he was not done justice. He was taken control of, and there was a little bit of a bait and switch going on there. But when I can work in another Wes Easter egg, you better believe I'll be able to do it.
I'm just saying that character, clearly that wasn't even me. That was
it was a doppelganger.
Fake version of me. There's a real Wes out there waiting to be explored. Maybe I could be my own superhero here.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should show what happened to the real Wes.
He's down in the swamp.
Yeah.
I got rolled.
Yeah, you got rolled bad, but you didn't die. You didn't die on screen, so you're still alive somewhere out there.
Absolutely. All right, Tim. Well, I had a lot of fun, talking about the gamut of things. We started talking about what's it like to be near the hive, but not actually, checking in. I think you and Mark probably made the best decision. Doug has made something similar to that. And crazy times we live in here. The industry is rapidly evolving, and you guys over at Iconic Comics are definitely, you're ahead of the game. You're setting the standard for comic book crowdfunding, and I'm really excited about what you guys are going to be doing next year.
Thank you. Yeah. Culture, like everything, abhors a vacuum. So it's a really good time for independent books because you have people who are just tired of the mainstream. They're looking for alternatives. And we hope that with Iconic Comics, so iconiccomics.com, we hope that we can fill in that gap and provide entertainment that is wholesome. It's varied enough that if there's a genre you like, whether that be horror or action or military or, superheroines, we hope that we can fill in that niche. And we are only getting started, and we're going to be expanding here pretty soon.
Very exciting stuff. I'll talk to you later, brother.
Yeah, absolutely.